I still remember the day I pulled that old cigar box out of the trash bin behind my husband's workshop. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the dust motes hang in the air like tiny ghosts. Tanya had called it junk and tried to toss it. I let her think I agreed. That box, with its cracked cedar veneer and a tiny brass latch no bigger than my thumbnail, turned out to be the single most important object I would ever hold. Because inside it was the first loose thread, and when I pulled, the entire tapestry of my daughter's lies unraveled into a federal case. I never imagined that 2 years later she'd be wearing a pink polo shirt that says, "Faked it for a suite," while scrubbing toilets at Maternal Mercy, my own motel, where every room key card prints the full fraud docket number. But that's exactly where we ended up. My name is Grace Williams, and I am 56 years old. For 32 years, I ran the Cozy Nook, a 20-unit roadside motel off Interstate 80 in central Iowa, with my husband, Frank. The Cozy Nook wasn't fancy. It had a flickering neon sign, a lobby that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old coffee, and a parking lot where the lines were repainted by me every spring with a 5-gallon bucket of traffic yellow. But the sheets were always pressed, the hot water never ran out, and the waffle iron at the complimentary breakfast was my own recipe. Frank handled the books and the handyman work. I managed the front desk, the housekeeping staff of 3, and the ledger of small kindnesses that kept our repeat customers coming back year after year. One of my most useful skills came from a very specific motel problem: guests locking themselves out. Over the decades, Frank taught me how to pick simple locks, a necessity when the master key went missing or a door needed to be opened without drilling the cylinder. I kept a small pick set in my purse, a couple of tension wrenches made from windshield wiper blade inserts, and a slim hook I filed down from a bobby pin. It was a trade secret that I never thought would become a weapon. Frank and I never had much. We poured every spare dollar into our retirement accounts, a pair of IRAs at Franklin Mutual and a small 400 one. From the years I spent working nights at a textile plant before the motel could support us. By the time Frank died 6 months ago, we had just over $140,000 tucked away, plus the deed to the motel free and clear. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to keep me comfortable until I couldn't climb the stairs anymore. Frank's heart gave out one morning while he was fixing a leaky toilet in room 14. No warning, just a thud, and then I found him on the tile with a wrench still in his hand. The world went gray for a long time after that. Our daughter Tanya was always a difficult child, but I'd loved her fiercely and forgiven her more times than I could count. She moved to Chicago after college, married a financial consultant named Derek, who had all the charisma of a late-night infomercial host and none of the substance. They drove a leased Mercedes and posted photos on Instagram of themselves at wine bars and golf resorts, but they never once invited us to visit. Frank had started to sour on them in the last 2 years, though he never told me exactly why. He'd get quiet whenever Tanya called, which was rare. After the funeral, Tanya and Derek descended on the motel like rescue workers at a disaster site, all soft voices and concerned frowns. Tanya held my hand while Derek made lists of assets to be managed. They started talking about selling the Cozy Nook, consolidating my accounts, maybe building a guest cottage on their property outside Naperville so I could be close to family. I nodded and dabbed my eyes. Inside, I felt like a steel trap waiting to be sprung, but I didn't know it yet. 1 week after Frank's service, Tanya and Derek helped me start sorting through his workshop, a cluttered back room behind the motel office that smelled of sawdust and machine oil. I was still swimming through grief, barely able to make decisions. Tanya kept tossing things into trash bags with unseemly haste: an old voltmeter, a box of mismatched screws, a stack of hunting magazines. When I reached for a small wooden box sitting on a high shelf, she intercepted me. "Mom, that's just garbage, it's gross. Let me toss it." She grabbed it and dropped it into a black bag, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light. I let it go. Hours later, after they'd left, I retrieved the bag from the dumpster out back. The box was locked, and I'd never seen it before in my life, which was strange because Frank and I had no secrets, or so I thought. I pried the latch with a small screwdriver from his bench. The inside smelled like old tobacco and paper. There were a couple of faded photographs, a Series E savings bond from 1986, and a small black Moleskine notebook. Tucked into the lining of the lid, under a flap of frayed silk, I found a little brass key with the number 1147 stamped on it and the logo of Heritage Savings and Trust, our bank. I slipped it into my pocket, heart suddenly thudding. Then I opened the notebook. On the very last page, in Frank's handwriting, the letters jagged as if he'd pressed hard, I read, "Grace, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Do not trust Tanya. She is not sick. Call Dr. Patel at Mercy West Clinic and ask about her treatment. Protect yourself." I set up a dead man's switch. The key is in the safe deposit box. Love, Frank. My hand started shaking so badly I had to sit down on a crate of motor oil. Frank had written this exactly 4 months before his heart attack. He knew something. He knew. I didn't call Dr. Patel immediately. I needed to think. I put the notebook and the bank key in my purse and climbed the stairs to our apartment above the motel lobby. That night, I barely slept, turning the key over and over in my fingers, wondering what was locked away. The next morning, Tanya and Derek came over with coffee and a crisis. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that blood relation is not a free pass for fraud. Tanya collapsed into the armchair by the window, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. Derek stood behind her, rubbing her shoulders. "Mom," she choked out, "I saw an oncologist last month because I was having abdominal pain and bloating. They did scans, blood work, everything. It's stage 3 ovarian cancer. Aggressive. The only treatment that might work is a new immunotherapy protocol at a clinic in Geneva. It's not covered by insurance. It costs $140,000. I don't have that. We don't have that." She thrust a manila envelope into my lap. Inside were MRI reports on thick film, a typed pathology summary with a Mercy West Clinic letterhead, a treatment plan with a 6-figure price tag, and a notarized letter from a doctor, Elena Vasquez, oncologist. The details looked convincing. Terminology like serous carcinoma, CA 125 levels elevated to 1,880 U/ml, CD8 plus T-cell infiltration patterns. I didn't understand the science, but I understood the theatrics. My stomach churned. I looked at my daughter, her mascara running, her lower lip trembling, and I saw the little girl I had rocked through fevers. But floating in my mind was Frank's sentence, "She is not sick." I played the part. I cried. I told her I would do anything. I would cash out the retirement account. Derek interjected smoothly, "Grace, we'll handle all the paperwork. We just need you to sign the distribution request, and we can have the funds wired to the Geneva Clinic's clearing account. It's a numbered account in Switzerland, very standard for international medical payments. I've already been in touch with their finance office." He placed a stack of forms on the coffee table. I pretended to fumble with my reading glasses, asking them to explain each section 3 times. I acted addled, forgetting dates, mixing up Tanya's childhood address. Derek's eyes lit up with greed poorly disguised as patience. Within 48 hours, I had liquidated my entire IRA, took the early withdrawal penalty, paid the estimated taxes, and emerged with a cashier's check for exactly $139,822. I handed it over in the motel lobby. Tanya hugged me, her body stiff as a mannequin. Derek pocketed the check with a practiced flick. "We're going to save you, baby," I whispered into her hair. She didn't say thank you. The next phase moved quickly. They insisted I could not stay alone in the motel any longer. "We want you with us, Mom. You need care. You need family." I nodded with a vacant smile. I packed a single suitcase, left the motel in the hands of my longtime front desk manager, a kind woman named Rosa, and moved into their guest house, a converted garage behind their suburban colonial. Guest house was generous. It had a twin bed, a mini-fridge, and a camera in the smoke detector that I spotted on day 2. I didn't touch it. I wanted them to see me being harmless. I started a subtle performance of cognitive decline. I'd misplace my keys and then find them in the refrigerator. I'd stare at the television without understanding the remote. Derek would smile tightly and guide my hand. Tanya would sigh and whisper to Derek about getting the durable power of attorney sorted before she's too far gone. I heard it all. Every night, I lay in that tiny bed and felt the outline of the brass key still in my purse, waiting for the right moment. That moment came after 2 weeks, when I was able to arrange a fake doctor's appointment for myself. I told Tanya I needed a checkup for my blood pressure, and she, content in the belief that I was feeble and compliant, dropped me at a clinic downtown. Once the car pulled away, I walked 4 blocks to Heritage Savings and Trust. I'd called ahead from a payphone near a bus stop. using my maiden name to ask about safe deposit box access. The bank was a classic granite building with green marble floors and a hush that made every sound echo. I presented my ID, Frank's death certificate, and the little brass key. The vault manager, a woman with librarian glasses, led me into the vault, a room of polished steel boxes, and turned her own guard key. My hand trembled as I slid the long metal box from its slot. I carried it to a private viewing room and closed the door. Inside, there was a thick manila envelope, yellowed with age, a small velvet pouch, and a letter addressed to me in Frank's unmistakable block letters. I opened the letter first. It was dated 2 years earlier. My dear Grace, if you're reading this, I'm already gone and you're facing something I hoped would never happen. I never wanted to keep secrets, but I needed to protect you without letting you carry the weight of suspicion. A few years ago, I found out that Tanya and Derek tried to take out a loan against the Cozy Nook using a forged power of attorney. I caught it just in time because the bank called to verify. I didn't tell you because I wanted to preserve your hope in our daughter, but I didn't stay idle. I set up an irrevocable spendthrift trust with our estate attorney, Harold Biggs. The motel is now in that trust, with you as lifetime beneficiary and sole trustee. Any sale or lien requires your personal, witnessed, notarized signature. If you become incapacitated or pass, the trust converts to a charitable remainder unitrust benefiting the Iowa Coalition Against Elder Abuse. The motel can never be taken from you. I also placed a small insurance policy in the pouch here, the proceeds to cover any immediate needs. Use the letter and the trust documents when the time comes. I love you more than I can say. Be the steel I always knew you were. Frank. Tears dripped onto the page. I had to stop reading twice. I opened the velvet pouch and found a cashier's check for $20,000, payable to me, no expiration. I sat in that tiny room for 10 minutes, breathing, before carefully photographing every page of the trust document and the letter with my phone. I left the originals in the box, returned it to the vault, and walked out into the sunlight feeling like I had been handed a shield forged in secret. I knew then that I needed Harold. Back at their house, I resumed my role of the fading old woman, but my mind was now a spreadsheet of steps, evidence, and traps waiting to be set. I needed proof. Real proof, the kind that would stand up in court. The first thing I did, even before calling Harold, was call Dr. Patel at Mercy West Clinic, using a burner phone I bought at a gas station with cash. I introduced myself, said Frank had left instructions. Doctor. Patel sounded confused, then worried. He pulled Tanya's chart. There was no cancer diagnosis. The pathology report number matched a patient named Tina Greer, a 60-year-old woman with a completely different social security number. The letter from Dr. Elena Vasquez was fake. No such physician was on staff. He sent me digital copies of the real records to an anonymous email I had set up at the library. I had my first thread. Living in their house was a masterclass in observation. Derek's cell phone buzzed constantly. He'd duck into their home office, a converted dining room with a hollow core door that didn't muffle high-pitched arguments about the lenders, and the balloon payment. I'd shuffle past with a watering can, humming, Quesira, Sierra. I saw manila envelopes from a firm called Precision Asset Recovery and glossy brochures for a bankruptcy attorney. Tanya's credit cards were getting declined at the grocery store. Meanwhile, she'd ordered a new living room set and a Peloton on credit. I studied their habits like a cryptographer. The office door had a basic interior lock set keyed to a generic key, but I noticed a locked metal filing cabinet in the closet beyond. The cabinet had a wafer lock, the exact type I'd picked 100 times on motel mail slots when guests lost their keys. I kept my little set in my toiletry bag, wrapped in a washcloth. Now they became my skeleton keys. The opportunity came during a sudden thunderstorm. A lightning strike tripped the main breaker, plunging the house into darkness. Derek cursed and stumbled around with a cell phone flashlight. Tanya shrieked that her hair straightener was fried. I said in my most feeble voice, "Oh dear, Frank always handled the electrical. But I think I remember the panel is in the basement. Let me try." They followed me downstairs with flashlights, helpless as toddlers. I knelt by the panel, flipped the main breaker back on, and while I was pretending to check connections, I accidentally on purpose knocked a stack of boxes in front of the filing cabinet. Derek, flustered, just waved at me to come upstairs. I said I'd clean up the mess. He didn't care. Once they were gone, I had 10 minutes. I retrieved my pick set from my purse. The tension wrench was a thin piece of spring steel with a 90-degree bend at the tip. I inserted it into the bottom of the keyway and applied gentle clockwise torque. Then I took my bobby pin hook and began to scrub the wafers from back to front, feeling for the subtle click as each one set against the shear line. Within 40 seconds, the plug rotated and the drawer slid open. The inside was a bureaucrat's nightmare of folders labeled in Tanya's loopy handwriting. One thick folder was titled Medical Records T. G. I photographed every page. There was the original pathology report for Tina Greer, with patient identification number, and a side-by-side comparison sheet where Tanya had scanned the document and used Photoshop to alter the name, date of birth, and some reference numbers. The forged stamp of the doctor's signature was a pixelated mess with blurring artifacts around the edges. I found a file on me. Grace Asset Consolidation Strategy. It contained a draft power of attorney form, already notarized with a fake stamp, granting Tanya full control over all my financial accounts and real property. My signature had been crudely forged at the bottom. They hadn't filed it yet. They were waiting for me to deteriorate further, or perhaps die conveniently. I also found a credit report for the Cozy Nook Motel, showing its appraised value of $420,000, and a partially completed home equity line of credit application in my name, with a string of falsified income statements listing me as a consultant earning 6 figures. I took crystal-clear photos, replaced everything exactly as I found it, and closed the cabinet. I walked upstairs with a dusting of basement grime on my knees and a heart full of cold, righteous fury. That night, I started recording conversations. My state follows one-party consent law, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of. I bought a small Sony digital voice recorder with a lavalier microphone, the kind that clips inside a bra or a shirt placket. I tested it by whispering in the guest house bathroom, then played it back to make sure the gain was high enough to capture across a room. I wore it under my blouse with the wire taped flat to my skin using medical tape, so no bulge would show. I captured Tanya on the phone with a friend the next afternoon, explaining how the old bat is so far gone she's practically signing things on command. We'll have the Hellock in 60 days, and then she can just wither away in the guest house, and we'll flip the motel to that developer from Ankeny. I recorded Derek calling a loan officer to request an appraisal waiver, using my social security number and answering security questions as if he were me. I recorded them laughing about my foggy episodes. I even captured Tanya practicing her teary phone voice for when she'd call Dr. Patel to follow up on treatment progress, a call she never actually made. Every night, I'd transfer the files to a USB drive I kept hidden in the battery compartment of an old clock radio. I finally called Harold Biggs, Frank's estate attorney from decades ago, a man in his 70s who still wore bow ties and kept a bottle of bourbon in his filing cabinet for grieving widows. We met at a coffee shop far from town, in a booth with high backs. I told him about the safe deposit box, the trust, the letter. I played him selected clips on my phone. Harold listened, removed his glasses, and then leaned forward. Grace, Frank came to me 4 years ago. He was visibly troubled. He'd found out they were drowning in 6-figure debt, that they'd forged a power of attorney to try to encumber the motel. He wanted to protect you without making you bitter, so we built that trust as a fortress. What you've gathered now is the ammunition we need to bring them down completely. But we must get your money back and ensure criminal charges stick. Harold connected me with a forensic accountant from his firm, a meticulous woman named Carol, and a special agent from the State Attorney General's Elder Fraud Unit, Agent Torres. Carol looked at the forged medical records, the altered Photoshop file metadata, and the fraudulent Hellock application and said, "These are textbook wire fraud and identity theft. With the recordings, we can get a warrant for the full seizure of assets." We laid out a plan. I would lead them to believe the Hellock was progressing, and I would schedule a final signing at the bank where Agent Torres would be waiting. But first, I needed a confession on tape about the cancer fraud specifically. I got it by manufacturing a moment of vulnerability. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table while Tanya was pouring wine, and I said softly, "Honey, I keep having nightmares. I dream that you're not really sick and I gave away our only security for nothing." She stiffened. I let my eyes water. Promise me on your father's grave that this is real." She leaned over, put her hand on mine, and looked directly into my eyes. "Mom, I swear on everything I love. The cancer is real. The treatment is real. You are saving my life. Without that money, I would be dead within 6 months. The recorder caught every syllable, the soft click of the wine glass, the hum of the refrigerator, and the naked lie. She even patted my hand. The duplicity was breathtaking. The maximum cruelty beat came on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I had decided to test the depths of their depravity before springing the trap. I staged a collapse in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room, where the hardwood floor would break my fall only slightly. I practiced in the guest house so I could go down without injury, landing sideways on my hip and shoulder, and then going limp with my eyes almost closed, my breathing shallow. Around 3 p.m., Tanya was scrolling her iPad on the sofa, and Derek was at the dining table with a laptop. I walked by carrying a laundry basket, then dropped it with a clatter, gasped, and crumpled. I felt the cold wood against my cheek, smelled the lemon polish they used on the baseboards. I went perfectly still. Through my lashes, I saw Tanya look up. "Oh my God," she said, but there was no panic in her voice, just a flat note of inconvenience. Derek stood. "Is she breathing?" Tanya walked over. I felt a toe nudge my hip. Not a hand to check my pulse, not a call for 911. A toe. A nudge as if I were a rug out of place. "She's breathing. Grab her purse." The loan officer said the final HUD-1 settlement statement needs her wet signature by tomorrow, and she keeps it in that accordion file in her bag. Get it now. I heard the zipper of my purse open. Paper rustled. "Got it. Should we call an ambulance?" Tanya asked, sounding bored. "In a minute. Let's make copies of these first. If she dies now, the trust locks up, remember. We need the HELOC funded before she codes." Then, footsteps. They stepped over my body. I lay there on the cold floor, my own daughter's shadow passing over my face while she prioritized a fraudulent loan over my life. The tiny recorder was taped under my left breast, and later I would never be able to transcribe those words without my hands trembling. After 4 minutes, Derek said, "Fine, call 911 now, but do the hysterical daughter act." Tanya's voice transformed into a wailing cry as she dialed. I waited until I heard sirens, then stirred and pretended to be dazed. They put on a show of relief and love so convincing that the EMTs smiled at the caring family. I played along, but inside the last filament of maternal hope was severed cleanly. They were not my family anymore. They were targets. The confrontation was set for the following Thursday at the Heritage Savings and Trust downtown, where all my accounts had originated. I had told Derek that the HELOC closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Per a phone call, he'd overheard me fake with a supposed bank officer. In reality, Harold had coordinated with the bank's fraud division, their head of security, and a notary, a woman named Mrs. Calloway, who was fully briefed and ready to witness a document that would seal their fate. Agent Torres and 2 county deputies would be waiting in an unmarked van in the parking lot. I dressed carefully that morning. A navy blue suit Frank always loved, a white blouse, and a pearl brooch he'd given me. I looked like a woman of substance, not a fading victim. I slipped the USB drive and the packet of photographed evidence into an inner pocket of my blazer. I carried a manila envelope with the so-called closing documents, but they were dummy pages with a tracing signature that Harold's team had embedded with a silent alarm code. The moment I signed Grace Elizabeth Williams in a specific box, the bank system would alert security. We entered the bank lobby at 10:03. Tanya was practically vibrating, Derek cool and polished in a blazer. A loan officer, Priya, greeted us and led us to a private glass-walled office. She had a stack of forms ready. I sat. Tanya hovered behind me. Derek leaned against the wall, arms crossed, checking his watch. Priya slid a document across the table. "Mrs. Williams, please review the settlement statement and sign here, here, and here." I looked at the paper. It was a standard HUD-1 for $250,000 line of credit secured by the cozy nook. I picked up the pen. The room felt charged, as if the air pressure had changed. Then I set the pen down with a small click. "Priya, before I sign, could you do me a favor and verify something for me with my daughter? I seem to be having memory issues." I turned to Tanya, my voice clear and knife-sharp. "Tanya, honey, tell everyone again the name of your oncologist and how the experimental treatment works. I just want to hear it one more time from your lips." She blinked, her eyes darting to Derek. "Dr. Elena Vasquez at the Geneva Oncology Institute. Immunotherapy chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy. Why are you doing this, Mom?" I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Because I want you to hear what you sound like when you lie." I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the small Bluetooth speaker, paired to my phone. I pressed play. The speaker filled the room with Tanya's voice from 3 weeks earlier, crystal clear. The old bat is so far gone she's practically signing things on command. Then Derek's, we'll flip the motel to that developer. Then Tanya's recent oath, I swear on everything I love, the cancer is real. The color drained from their faces. Derek lunged forward, but Priya had already pressed a silent button under her desk, and 2 bank security officers appeared at the door. I held up my hand. I'm not done. Priya, I'd like to present the bank with evidence of fraud. I pulled out manila envelopes from my bag and spread them on the table. A forensic analysis of the forged medical records showing the pixelation and mismatched patient ID. Photos of the filing cabinet contents, including the fake power of attorney and the falsified income statements. A certified letter from Dr. Patel confirming 0 cancer diagnosis, and the USB drive with all the audio recordings. These 2 individuals induced me to liquidate my retirement account under false pretenses. They are currently attempting to execute a fraudulent HELOC in my name. I am making a formal complaint, and I believe Agent Torres of the Elder Fraud Division would like a word. As if summoned, the glass door opened and Agent Torres in a dark jacket stepped in, followed by 2 uniformed deputies. Tanya screeched, "She's senile. She's making this up. I have cancer." Agent Torres said, "Ma'am, we have your medical records from 3 separate hospitals confirming you've never been treated for malignancy. You're under arrest for elder financial exploitation, forgery, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Derek tried to bolt but found his path blocked by the deputies. I watched as my daughter was Mirandized, her wrists cuffed behind her back, her face a mask of fury. The bank's security cameras captured everything. As they led her past me, she hissed, "You'll regret this. No one will believe an old woman." I looked her in the eye and said, "I already do, honey. I already do." The aftermath was a meticulous process of legal restitution and public accountability. With the overwhelming evidence, the criminal case moved swiftly. Tanya, facing multiple felonies, eventually pleaded no contest to 1 count of first-degree theft by deception and 1 count of criminal forgery. Derek pleaded guilty to conspiracy and a separate charge of bankruptcy fraud from prior business dealings. The court ordered full restitution of my $139,822 plus 6% annual interest, totaling $152,408 by the time the judgment was entered. They had spent a portion on credit card payments and that new living room set, but the forensic accountant froze their accounts and seized assets, including the Mercedes, which was sold at auction. I got my money back in full within 4 months. The judge also slapped Tanya with 5 years of supervised probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent injunction barring her from ever serving as a fiduciary or managing anyone else's finances. Derek got 18 months in state prison, but community service was where I got creative. Under the sentencing order, the court could assign the community service to a nonprofit organization. I'd started one. With Frank's trust as a foundation, I incorporated Maternal Mercy, Inc., an organization dedicated to providing temporary housing and financial literacy to elderly victims of family fraud. I bought a small, rundown motel 6 blocks from my cozy nook, a 24-unit property that had been shuttered for 2 years. I renovated it with my returned funds and some of the auction proceeds from Tanya's assets. I replaced every mattress, painted every room a soothing sage green, and put a small library of resources on elder financial abuse in the lobby. I renamed it Maternal Mercy and opened its doors as a hybrid boutique inn and victim support center. The judge, a woman with a keen sense of poetic justice, approved Tanya's community service assignment to Maternal Mercy. So at 7 a.m., every morning, my daughter reports for duty. Her uniform is a pink polo shirt with our logo on the front, a heart wrapped in a gavel. The back reads in bold navy letters, "Faked it for a suite." The shirt is not optional. She cleans rooms, scrubs bathrooms, strips beds, and folds linens under the supervision of Rosa, who is now the general manager and takes no nonsense. Every room key card at Maternal Mercy comes in a small cardboard sleeve printed with the county court docket number, a QR code that links directly to the public fraud case record, and the phrase, "Justice washes clean." Guests sometimes ask questions, and Tanya is required to answer honestly per the terms of her probation. A framed article from the Des Moines Register hangs in the lobby, detailing the whole saga. The motel stays busy, often booked weeks in advance by true crime tourists and people who appreciate a good redemption arc. Every dollar of profit above operating costs goes into a scholarship fund for elder abuse survivors. I still run the cozy nook, but now I split my time between the two properties. I keep Frank's notebook and the brass key in a fireproof safe in my office. Some nights I take them out and trace his handwriting, remembering the careful way he tightened bolts, the quiet fortifications he built around me. He knew. He gave me the tools and I wielded them. That's the thing about being a mother. You learn to be soft when you need to be, and you learn to be harder than tungsten when your children try to destroy you. Mercy isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about giving them exactly what they've earned. In Tanya's case, that means a pink uniform and a key to a room she has to clean, not own. And whenever I see her pushing a housekeeping cart down the breezeway, I don't feel triumph. I feel a hollow sort of peace, the peace that comes from knowing the truth ran its course and the family ledger is finally, brutally balanced. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. If this story resonated with you, hit like and subscribe for more tales of quiet mothers, meticulous revenge, and justice served exactly as it was calculated. I'll see you in the next one.